In the immersive world of Dungeon Break, a captivating online game scenario unfolds before the players. A multitude of commands fills the screen, guiding them through a thrilling adventure. Upon successfully averting a catastrophic dungeon break, a coveted reward awaits, a glimpse into a tangible universe of unimaginable wonders. In an awe-inspiring spectacle, a colossal portal materializes, emanating a radiant light of astonishing intensity. Emerging from its depths are malevolent creatures, their viscid forms accompanied by blazing red eyes and colossal twin-bladed axes. It is at this critical moment that the valiant protagonist, accompanied by a trusted comrade, emerges into the scene, bearing their formidable weapons. With ferocious growls, the monsters fix their gaze upon the protagonist, closing in for a relentless assault. Sensing the imminent chaos, the comrade implores their master, warning of the impending turmoil. However, undeterred, the master dismisses the concerns with unwavering faith in their abilities. Suddenly, a timely message appears, signaling the commencement of the combo gacha. The remarkable stroke of fortune smiles upon Lu Shan, as his luck intertwines with the divine blessing of the saintess. Drawing upon this newfound power, he channels it into a resounding clash of his weapon, conjuring a breathtaking illusion that materializes behind him. With an infectious grin, he proclaims the arrival of Zhang Fei, echoing a lion's roar. The astonishing revelation weakens the encroaching attackers, momentarily throwing them off balance. Taking advantage of this critical opportunity, the boy valiantly confronts the hordes, single-handedly combating their onslaught. As the tide of battle intensifies, the swarm of monsters continues to surge forth. In a display of unrivaled skill, the master unleashes the devastating crushing tiger cyclone bullet attack technique. With unparalleled precision, a tempestuous whirlpool materializes, spiraling forth with colossal force. This powerful vortex propels an onslaught of rocks and stones, hurtling through the air with incredible velocity, scattering the encroaching monsters and stalling their relentless advance. Jin Jiangdo, unlike his peers who find enjoyment in outdoor activities such as playing football, has an insatiable passion for comics and novels. His fascination with these fictional worlds is so intense that he yearns to step into their pages and become one of their beloved characters. However, his aspirations take a detour when he becomes engrossed in a game, where he consistently secures the second position as a professional gamer. On the fateful day of February 2, 2022, an inexplicable phenomenon transpires, blurring the lines between the real world and the realm of gaming. Dungeons materialize throughout the city, unleashing magical and ferocious creatures. To combat these newfound threats, enigmatic individuals wielding swords and axes emerge. These extraordinary beings are known as mana users, garnering more attention and adulation than any celebrity or sports figure. Jin is captivated by one such mana hero, yearning to emulate their extraordinary abilities. Vowing to become a mana user himself, he sets his sights on an ambitious goal. However, as 8 long years pass by, Jin's dreams remain shattered. Overwhelmed by despair, he spirals into depression, seeking solace in alcohol. He laments his inability to meet the requirements of becoming a proficient mana user, branding himself a fool for harboring such lofty fantasies. Returning to his apartment one fateful evening, Jin is taken aback to find a peculiar girl waiting for him. She introduces herself as Winry Makina, an agent from the universe beyond. According to her, Jin has been bestowed with a miraculous gift, and she has arrived to present him with his treasured prize. In his drunken and bewildered state, Jin suspects her presence to be either part of a cult or an elaborate scam. The girl reveals that Jin is the second individual ever to awaken level 3 communication since the inception of the universe. With a gentle touch, she imparts upon him a series of remarkable skills: observation, status window, tolerance, integration, and info gacha. Amidst the haze of confusion, Jin hears a voice referring to him as the first miracle, guiding him to utilize the status window for any questions he may have. Curiosity piqued, Jin clicks on the info gacha button within the status window, and to his astonishment, a peculiar creature materializes before him, dropping a golden capsule into his hands. With trembling anticipation, he opens the capsule, revealing a note detailing the upcoming lottery date and the winning numbers. The significance of this unexpected turn of events begins to dawn upon Gene, as he realizes that his journey has taken an unforeseen and extraordinary twist. The day before, guild leader Choi gathers all the gamers, including Gene, to provide them with guidance on how to compete against the dungeon guilds in their quest for mana stones. He emphasizes the intense competition they will face and urges them to fight with all their might. Commending Gene for his exceptional dungeon exploration skills, Choi reveals that their team has secured a contract for a newly discovered dungeon, thanks to Jin's competitiveness. It becomes evident that Gene is highly sought after among guilds, with renowned ones offering substantial sums of money just to have him on their side. However, one of Jin's rivals, Joe, belittles him, accusing him of being a smooth-talking salesperson who cozies up to famous guild leaders. Cho reprimands Joe, asserting that Jin's efficiency lies not only in his hunting prowess but also in his contributions to the guild's overall functioning. Apologizing to Gene for Joe's behavior, Choi compensates him handsomely for securing the guild's contract. Overjoyed, Gene realizes that his lifelong dream of becoming a mana user has finally come true, as he has won the coveted awakened fee of $300,000. The awakened fee is a magical tool that not only grants ordinary people the ability to become mana users, but also calculates their skill levels. In the following sequence, each mana user undergoes the process of having their talents measured, also known as the awakened. It is akin to a lucky draw, where even if one possesses a high number of talents suitable for combat, they are deemed prepared. Furthermore, if a person acquires 3 skills, their level increases. However, if those skills fail to meet the desired standards, they may end up with undesirable abilities or talents. When Jin's apprentice, Seo Yoon, enters the Awakened, she astounds everyone with a mana level of 27 and possesses 11 talents, an extraordinary feat for a beginner. She is hailed as the best rising star among them. Then it is Jin's turn to step into the machine, filled with confidence. However, he is instructed to place both his hands on the legendary Odin's Eye for 10 minutes. To his dismay, Jin's mana level is revealed to be a mere 7, accompanied by only 3 talents, rendering him ineligible for combat. In the present, Gene finds himself pondering the identity of the mysterious woman who granted him those skills. Nevertheless, he takes solace in his newfound ability to predict the future through the Gacha info skill he acquired. With this skill at his disposal, Gene eagerly awaits the signals that will guide him on his path forward. However, the Gacha creature warns Gene that each attempt will cost him 1 mana. With his current mana count at 7, he decides to make 5 attempts. Much to his disappointment, all the predictions he receives turn out to be useless. Jin's frustration grows as he checks his current mana status, realizing he only has 1 mana left. He wonders if all these events are happening in real time. Glancing at his mana watch, Gene contemplates that the watch will only display updated stats once it receives an update from the Awakened. Realizing the potential benefits, he considers using the status window skill to view his real-time stats while raiding the dungeon, enabling him to strategize accordingly. This could prove immensely advantageous for him. Although Gene can replenish his mana within 24 hours, his maximum capacity remains at 7. Even with a skill, he wouldn't be able to utilize it frequently, nor could he acquire the necessary number of gacha attempts. Nonetheless, he remains grateful for acquiring such a valuable skill and looks forward to gradually increasing his mana capacity. Suddenly, the gacha creature drops a crystal-like object, triggering the status window to display the disclosure of super rare information. The information reveals that on April 14, 2030, at 5:07 hours, a dungeon named Treasure Mole Cave will appear in the vicinity of Mount Guanak. Determined, Gene embarks on his quest, walking relentlessly until he reaches his destination. He patiently awaits the arrival of 5:07 hours, and precisely at that time, a portal to the dungeon materializes, confirming the authenticity of the gacha information. The dungeon is no ordinary one, it is a treasure dungeon, and only 2 others of its kind are known to exist: the Treasure Dragon's Den in England and the Treasure Panda's Bamboo Forest in China. Typically, dungeons are unnamed as they vanish once raided. However, certain dungeons earn their names either by decimating the surrounding area or by harboring a legendary item. Jin hopes to lay his hands on a legendary weapon comparable to those used by players from Southeast Asia. As Jin enters the treasure dungeon, he discovers there are no monsters present, but rather a series of tests he must overcome in order to obtain his desired item. Jin considers it an advantage, knowing that his life won't be at risk from battling monsters. Taking a gamble, he steps further into the depths of the dungeon, relying on his observation skills to navigate the surroundings. Eventually, he uncovers a concealed rock wall infused with illusionary magic. Upon reaching a door, he opens it, only to be greeted by a group of dwarves who welcome him as a weak but talented challenger, acknowledging his ability to break through the illusionary magic. The dwarves congratulate Jin for successfully passing the first test, and he ponders whether these dwarves are the moles mentioned in the dungeon's name. One of the dwarves, named Giz, informs Jin that for the second test, he must engage in a fight with him. If Jin manages to defeat Giz, he will be rewarded and allowed to leave. However, even if Jin loses, he will still be released. Giz shares that there were 4 others who were expelled before him, prompting the other dwarves to mock Jin for his naivety. Giz expresses his belief that the human race is uncivilized and lacking in common sense. He refers to their fights as spars, and claims that it has become boring to spar with humans since they are defeated after a single blow. This time, Giz proposes a different kind of battle that would be mutually beneficial. Curious, Jin asks why the dwarves bring the supposedly uncivilized human race to their realm. Giz explains that it is due to a pact they made, which restricts the humans' actions in exchange for acquiring greater power, with the consequence of death if the pact is broken. Giz proudly presents an invention developed by the 7 intelligent dwarves, a television and a console. He suggests they battle by playing a game. Jin becomes concerned as he realizes that, despite being a professional gamer, he has never played this particular game before. The game begins, and Jin offers expert advice to Giz, but the dwarf refuses to accept help, dismissing Jin as a commoner who would have no knowledge about games given the lack of technology during his time. Giz proceeds to explain the game's controls. After a while, Jin recognizes that the game is strikingly similar to one he frequently played called Legend of Legends. Confident in his abilities, Jin declines the offer for practice time and insists on playing the game immediately. Suddenly, Jin's talent for gaming soars, boosting all his stats by 100%. He plays with remarkable expertise, taunting the dwarves and suggesting that they should be the ones surrendering. Giz, stunned by his defeat, reluctantly agrees to provide Jin with his reward from the dwarves' treasure. However, Giz tries to dodge the request, leading the other dwarves to express their desire for a fight as well. Jin brushes them off, stating that he doesn't want to waste any more time. Despite Jin's intention to leave, the dwarves persist and offer him something exclusive if he can defeat them all. Jin effortlessly dispatches the dwarves in battle. Analyzing Jin's abilities, Giz mockingly questions how someone with such a low level of mana was able to enter the dungeon in the first place. Giz is thoroughly shocked by the analysis of Jin's communication level, which turns out to be 3, nearly giving the dwarves a heart attack. He advises Jin that with generations of honing his talents and skills, he could potentially rise to level 2. However, level 3 is an entirely different dimension. For instance, if Jin were to have swordsmanship level 3, it would encompass the essence of all swordsmanship. Giz emphasizes that it's all about building concepts. Recognizing his limitations, Giz explains that while he can make some adjustments to Jin's stats, level 3 is beyond his capabilities, and his colleague Mikhail, who can see the future, would be better suited to handle the situation. The dwarves invite Jin to wait outside the workshop, cautioning that entering would result in instant melting. After a while, the dwarves emerge from the workshop and present Jean with a seemingly ordinary wristband. Disappointed, Jean remarks that perhaps the elves rushed to create something useless or pulled an item out of storage. One of the dwarves becomes furious and offers Jean the option to return it if he doesn't want it. Surprised by the reaction, Jean quickly puts on the wristband without further hesitation. He refrains from asking any more questions, and Mikhail hands him a bag filled with exotic jewels, explaining that it serves as a sightseeing fee since he will be observing level 3 in action. When Jean opens the bag, he gasps at the sight of mana jewels. Soon after, Giz teleports Jean out of the dungeon and back to Guanak Mountain. Jean finds it difficult to believe that his experience was real, but the wristband and the burning bump on his hand serve as proof. Thanks to the band, his stats receive a significant boost, and he wonders how it could be stronger than world-famous swords. Despite not having any combat-related talents, he discovers that the band can transform into any weapon. With his remaining 5 mana, Jean decides to use the info gacha, hoping for useful information. However, all 5 attempts prove futile. The next day, when Jean arrives at his guild, he finds it empty, even Siyun is on a break. Choi informs him that there will be an expedition in 6 days. Jean realizes that Choi intentionally distanced him from Joy, knowing that in another guild, Jean would have been expelled for not showing any progress as a mana user. Jean appreciates Choi's consideration and readily agrees to participate in the expedition. Playfully mocking Jean about the golden bracelet, Choi inquires where he obtained it, to which Jean simply replies that he received it from someone. Realizing that the expedition will provide an excellent opportunity to test the power of the ultimate weapon, Jean eagerly awaits the upcoming adventure. The day of the expedition arrives, and Jean is included as a team member. Choi instructs Jean to use the Analyzer, a magical tool that provides accurate information about dungeons, to verify the information provided by Zhang. Jean confirms that the dungeon is a D-rank destruction dungeon suitable for less than 10 people. Choi informs the team that their mission in this dungeon is to collect mana stones. Meanwhile, Joe teases Jean for returning to work despite receiving a seemingly insignificant awakening talent. Choi proceeds to introduce the rest of the 6 members of the combat squad. He mentions that in a previous expedition to a C-rank dungeon, they brought more members than necessary, resulting in the deaths of 2 B-rank members, with only Joe and 2 other C-rank members surviving. As a precaution, Choi emphasizes the importance of safety and emphasizes that everyone must obey the orders of their captain, Joe, while remaining vigilant at all times. The squad enters the dungeon and encounters lizard men, but Joe effortlessly defeats one of them with his weapon, showcasing his skill as an A rank. After incapacitating the monster, Joe instructs Seo Yoon to deliver the final blow and then assigns Jean the task of collecting the mana stones from the corpses. Seo offers to do it herself, citing her junior status, but Joe dismisses her, explaining that once a squad enters a dungeon, all members are considered equal. Jean willingly accepts the task. Seo confronts Joe, insisting that Jean should have the last hits since she has already taken down 2 monsters. Joe then points out the significant difference in mana between Seo, who has 27 mana, and Jean, who only has 7 mana, stating that it is for the future of the guild that Seo should have the kills. The rest of the squad members grow increasingly displeased with Joe's rude and arrogant behavior. They believe that Joe is solely focused on personal gain and fails to mentor the newcomers. They plan to file a complaint against him once they are out of the dungeon. Jean, meanwhile, constantly ponders what Joe's scheming mind might be plotting and questions why he allocated 10% of Seo's required experience points to her. Eventually, they reach the boss lizardman's chamber, finding a ferocious creature awaiting them. However, Joe swiftly delivers a powerful strike, killing the boss in one blow, leaving all the members in awe. The squad members feel relieved that the battle is over. One member confronts Joe for giving all the points to Seo, expressing the desire for the newcomers to also receive points for leveling up and suggesting that the team leader, Jean, should have dealt the final blow to the boss. In response, Joe states that he cannot let them leave the dungeon and abruptly stabs his sword into the member who confronted him, leaving everyone shocked and fearful. The other squad members are stunned by Joe's brutal act of killing one of their own. In a swift motion, he proceeds to eliminate all the remaining members, leaving only Seo and Jean alive. Before Jean can fully comprehend the situation, his observation skills kick in, allowing him to perceive Joe's abnormal increase in stats, with 69 mana and the skill of Corpse Plunderer. Realizing Joe's true nature, Jean denounces him as a murderous villain, a user who has committed the crime of hunting down other users. He uncovers the fact that during the previous expedition in the C-rank dungeon, Joe was responsible for killing the B-rank members and now intends to eliminate Seo in order to acquire her exceptional abilities. Just as Joe is about to launch an attack on Jean, Jin's magical wristband activates, transforming into a mighty sword that blocks Joe's strike. Seo also joins the fray, but Joe easily swats her aside, instructing her to wait her turn. Jean becomes increasingly concerned as the skill gap between him and Joe seems insurmountable. However, he employs his observation skill on Seo and discovers that she has reached level 2. Jean implores Seo to utilize her mana by creating a magical shield. Seo quickly forms a protective barrier around them. Joe exerts his utmost effort to break through the shield with his menacing sword, causing Seo to struggle to maintain it. Meanwhile, Jean seizes the opportunity to attack and eliminate the boss lizard, which would allow them to leave the dungeon. When Joe becomes aware of Jin's intentions, he grows furious and intensifies his efforts to weaken the shield. Although he succeeds in doing so, Jean has already pierced the boss with his sword. However, Joe menacingly declares that they cannot immediately leave the dungeon after defeating the boss. They must wait for 10 to 30 minutes. In a triumphant retort, Jean informs Joe that he miscalculated, as Jean was aiming for a level up. Suddenly, a status window appears, revealing that Jean has reached level 2 and gained another skill, Connection Gacha. This skill enables him to acquire a random skill from any person in the true universe. Jean decides to utilize the Connection Gacha and receives a card. With a jubilant smile, Jean declares that it is now Joe's turn to suffer the consequences of his actions. Suddenly, a radiant light envelopes Jean, causing a remarkable transformation that astounds Joe. Determined to eliminate Jean before any unforeseen consequences arise, Joe launches multiple attacks, only to have them effortlessly deflected by Jean. Growing desperate, Joe unleashes his ultimate technique, the Heavenly Halberd, which manages to momentarily unsettle Jean. Seizing the opportunity, Jean hastily opens his status window and discovers that the acquired skills belong to a renowned Chinese military general and warlord, named Lubu Fenxian. Additionally, he finds himself wielding a colossal double-bladed axe as his weapon. Although Jean struggles initially, lacking familiarity with the weapon, his body instinctively adapts to its usage, as if Lubu himself has taken control. This phenomenon perfectly embodies the essence of the Connection Gacha skill. Joe, despite mocking Jean for his perceived lack of skill and talent, becomes increasingly intimidated by Jin's current avatar. Determined to end the battle, Joe unleashes his ultimate move, the Pinpoint Thrust, an attack that even an A or S rank would find difficult to evade. Yet, Jean effortlessly conjures a protective barrier that shatters Joe's mighty sword, enabling Jean to swiftly overpower and defeat him. Jean realizes that even an A rank like Joe is no match for his newfound power. Drawing the conclusion that he is an SS rank, Jean sets aside further exploration of the Connection Gacha skill for later, focusing instead on attending to the unconscious Seo. Approaching Seo, Jean attempts to awaken her but fails. Suddenly, a spectral figure resembling a genie materializes beside him, shocking Jean with its unexpected appearance. The genie explains that Seo is displaying signs of QI berserk due to excessive internal energy usage. Jean is startled to learn that he was the one who summoned the genie, who reveals himself to be Lubu Nim or Fengxian. Lubu instructs Jean to infuse internal energy into Seo's life gateway pressure point, successfully reviving her. Lubu advises Jean that Seo simply requires ample rest. Expressing gratitude to Jin for freeing him from a monotonous existence, Lubu departs as his summoning time expires, expressing hope for Jin to call upon him in the future. Jin acknowledges that his encounter with Lubu was largely a stroke of luck. He receives rewards for accomplishing the highest possible objective, resulting in a portion of Lubu's abilities remaining within Jin's body and automatically boosting his stats. Meanwhile, Choi anxiously awaits his team's return at the entrance of the dungeon portal. When Jin emerges, carrying the unconscious Seo, Choi inquires about the other team members. Sensing the urgency in Jin's voice, he swiftly summons medical assistance. Jin informs Choi that he has an urgent report to deliver. Jin confides in Choi, revealing that Joe was a treacherous murderer. He presents Choi with a tape from a dungeon camera, provided by squad member Jong Yuna, who participated as a supporter. As Choi watches the tape, filled with rage and hatred, he blames himself for failing to see through Joe's facade, as he had always trusted him as an A rank. Jin reassures Choi that no one was aware of Joe's true identity, as he had masterfully concealed it all this time. Choi realizes that Joe possessed a skill that allowed him to hunt down and absorb the skills and talents of his team members, and the deaths in previous expeditions were the result of Joe's betrayal. Jin explains that Joe would kill indiscriminately and then hide any evidence within the dungeon, all to eliminate any trace against him. Intrigued, Choi asks Jin how Joe met his demise. Jin finds himself in a dilemma because, although he trusts Choi more than anyone else, revealing the existence of his magical wristband would put Jin and everyone around him in danger. Thinking on his feet, Jin fabricates a story, claiming that the lizardman warrior they encountered underwent a mutation. He spins a tale about the boss using one of the skills of previous dungeon explorers to ambush Joe. Choi finds it hard to believe, stating that even if a D-rank dungeon boss acquired such a skill, it would have been challenging for it to defeat Joe. Jin suggests that the acquired skill could have been Lee Jinsu's stealth, and Choi readily agrees. Jin adds that the boss sneaked up on Joe while he was preoccupied with Seo and Jin's fight. Despite Joe managing to swiftly decapitate the boss, he sustained a fatal injury. Jin remarks that it's karma, as Joe died from the skill of the person he had previously killed. With that, Joe urges Jin to rest well and bids him farewell. Jin visits Seo at the hospital before returning home. As he lies down, he opens his status window and notices the connection gacha button. Clicking on the arrow of the info gacha, an information box with various categories appears. He sees a list of all the mana users he has encountered before, including a picture of Lubu Fengxian with a summoning cost of 99 mana. The other two cards depict the dwarves Giz, priced at 347 mana, and Mikiel, priced at 361 mana. Jin ponders that a human would never possess enough mana to summon them. He realizes that this ability automatically registers the names of individuals he meets personally in a virtual album, allowing him to load their unique skills or talents for various situations. He concludes that he needs to continue encountering low-level but talented mana users. Among the images, he also finds a picture of Winry Makina, the mysterious woman who bestowed him with the miracle. Jin realizes that his immediate task is to increase his mana capacity, either by leveling up or relying on the connection gacha. However, he decides to postpone using the connection gacha until he possesses enough mana. Instead, he tries his luck with the info gacha the next day, but once again fails to find anything useful. Finally, on the following day, he summons the connection gacha and successfully brings forth Lu Shan, the ruler of the Han dynasty. A genie-like creature, resembling a cartoon character, appears and introduces himself as the great Lu Shan, much to Jin's amusement. As Jin mocks Lu, the latter is hurt and reminds Jin not to underestimate others' capabilities. However, Jin retorts by saying that once he returns to his normal self, he will see Lu's talents. In a fit of rage, Lu shouts, urging Jin to witness his abilities. To Jin's disappointment, he discovers that Lu Shan's only talent is good luck, which is denoted as level 2. Jin learns that in the past, Lu Shan's good luck not only granted him favor but also allowed him to survive the ferocious Battle of Changban, while being surrounded by Cao Cao's army. Being the son of Liu Bei, Lu Shan lived a comfortable life regardless of the circumstances. Jean ponders how such simple good luck would be useful in dungeon battles, unable to comprehend its value. Seeking more information, Jean summons the info gacha and a golden capsule descends. Jean realizes with gratitude that this fortunate event is all thanks to Lu Shan, his good luck charm. The capsule reveals that on July 30, 2030, a dungeon will emerge on a hill near Chorwin County, offering the opportunity to obtain a skill stone as a reward. Although it is 3 months away, Jean can't help but entertain thoughts of the stone's potential value, which could earn him millions. Curious about why Lu Shan is providing him with so much goodwill despite Jean forcing him out of his resting place, Jean asks Lu. Lu explains that he is not the real Lu Shan from the actual universe but a fabricated persona compiled from recorded information. Jean realizes that not only abilities but also personality traits are loaded and used to create an individual who can think and speak for themselves. Lu states that as Jin's creator, it is only natural for him to provide Jean with goodwill. Even if Jean were to call upon someone else, that person would assist him to the best of their abilities. Time for Lu to depart arrives, as his task is complete. He bids farewell to Jean and vanishes. Meanwhile, guild leader Choi decides to disband his Justice Guild due to the deaths of most squad members, making it impossible to continue clearing dungeons. Although Choi attempts to recruit new users, their prices have skyrocketed due to the user bubble. Additionally, rumors circulate about the numerous deaths that occurred in Choi's guild within a short period, further hindering recruitment efforts. Jean and the remaining team members feel disheartened, but Jean vows to always be a user. Choi presents Jean with an application form for the South Korean Users Association, urging him to enroll in the new education facility as soon as possible. However, Choi is uncertain about Seo Yoon's intentions and whether she wants to continue as a user. Revealing another forged mana watch found among Joe's belongings, depicting his membership in the Karma Guild, the largest multinational guild in the world, Choi warns Jean to be cautious of the fanatical members who act as villains for their cult leader. Choi advises Jean to stay vigilant as they may be on the lookout for him following Joe's demise. They part ways on good terms. The next day, Jean once again engages the connection gacha, hoping for a miraculous outcome. Jean stands on the grounds of the magnificent academy for the Users Association, having updated his mana watch as required for admission. Thanks to the King of the Arms wristband he wears and the gold card he obtained from the connection gacha, his stats are unbelievably high for a level 2 user. In this moment, Bradamanti, one of the 12 Knights of Charlemagne, appears to assist Jean. To his pleasant surprise, Jean notices that Seo Yoon is also present at the academy, healthy and full of energy. Jean suspects that Seo may be a bit suspicious of him since he discovered her skills before she updated her mana watch. However, Seo proves him wrong by pretending not to have noticed anything peculiar. Jean considers Seo to be more mature than himself and believes he is no match for her. At the Users Academy, Jean receives education on how to enter a dungeon, which requires compulsory training for at least 1 month. Users who belong to a guild receive education from their respective guilds, while those without guilds attend academies authorized by the nation. However, applicants often prefer the individual training provided by guilds over the academy, where several students are taught together. Another reason for avoiding the academy is the admission test, as it attracts a large number of participants. Jean and Seo, along with other students, sit for the test under the supervision of a B rank invigilator. The first test involves hitting sandbags as hard as possible, and those who score over 30 pass the test. A burly student arrogantly claims that scoring 30 is a piece of cake for him. However, when he strikes the sandbag, he is overpowered and only manages a mere 27 points. Frustrated, he blames the machine, but the invigilator punches the bag so forcefully that he scores a remarkable 88 points, surprising everyone. Many students attempt the test but fail miserably. When it's Sio's turn, she scores 67 points, leaving Jean amazed. The B-rank Invigilator is impressed by Sio and can't help but check her stats. Upon discovering Sio's exceptional abilities, the Invigilator exclaims that with stats like hers, the greatest guilds in the country would fight over her. This raises Sio's curiosity about why she chose to join the academy. Soon, it's Jin's turn, and he freezes with fear. He activates his wristband, which updates his stats by 100%. Jean strikes the sandbag with such force that it shatters into pieces, earning him an astonishing 91 points. The crowd is stunned as there is only a 6-point difference between Jean and the academy's highest scorer. Sio becomes even more convinced that Jean is hiding something from her. Meanwhile, at Choi's Justice Guild, several guild leaders approach him to inquire about Sio. Choi informs them that she is still recovering from her injury at the academy. However, one of the leaders orders their scouts to be sent to the academy to gather more information. The scene shifts to the academy, where it is explained that the entire education period lasts for 1 month. The first week focuses on dungeon exploration and dealing with monsters. The second week is dedicated to weapons training. In the third week, students are taught emergency response protocols, and in the final week, they undergo joint tactical training. On the last day of the academy, a graduation test is held to assess the students' abilities. Sio is anxiously fretting over her upcoming graduation test, worrying whether she will pass or not. To her surprise, Jean seems completely unconcerned about the test. Lost in her thoughts, Sio is startled when someone calls her name. It is a representative from the Orient Guild who offers her an invitation to join. Sio declines the offer and quickly flees, seeking refuge behind a tall pillar, hoping to remain unnoticed. However, a member from the Rams Guild quickly spots her and approaches, extending an invitation for her to join. Poor Sio runs away in fear. It is revealed that many guild leaders continue to pursue her, but Sio refuses all their offers, desperately trying to escape their persistent advances. She manages to slip back inside the academy, breathing a sigh of relief as outsiders are not permitted inside. During lunch with Jean, Sio expresses her frustration with the guild leaders and how they followed her to the training room the previous day. Jean remarks that her popularity is steadily increasing, and it is likely that more guild leaders will approach her. He suggests that she consider joining a suitable guild. Sio, however, asserts that she wants to live her life according to her own free will. Just as Sio is about to ask Jean out, they are rudely interrupted by another student who addresses Jean as Hyung Nim, and challenges him to a spar. The student, named Kong, explains that sparring in the Mana Virtual poses no risk of physical harm. Jean declines, as he prefers to avoid the Mana Virtual. He knows that his game talents would activate, doubling his stats, and he would become frustrated with his real-life limitations. Sio then surprises Kong by challenging him to spar with her instead. Kong is taken aback, as Sio had always refused his previous offers to spar. However, to everyone's surprise, Sio quickly pins Kong down, displaying impressive skills. The two engage in a fierce virtual fight. During the battle, Jean observes that while Sio's attacks are remarkable, Kang's endurance to withstand those blows is equally extraordinary. Meanwhile, the teacher has high expectations for Jean in the upcoming graduation test. The teacher reflects on a student who appeared 3 years ago, possessing 13 talents, the highest number ever seen. This student had declined offers from all the guilds and entered the academy. After graduating, he became the 9th SS user, garnering great acclaim. The day of the final test arrives, and the students are informed that they must clear an E-rank dungeon. The teacher emphasizes that clearing this dungeon will mark their transformation into true users with the right to enter dungeons. A B-rank instructor will accompany them for safety, but the students are warned not to let their guard down. Sio, however, is overcome with panic due to her traumatic experience in a previous dungeon. She experiences hallucinations of Joe attacking her repeatedly, but Jean reassures her that she will return safely. Kong also encourages her to swiftly clear the dungeon. The students are divided into groups A and B, with Seo being in Group A. After a while, a signal indicates that Group A has successfully cleared the dungeon. They emerge, unharmed and safe. Now it's Group B's turn to enter the dungeon. Both Kong and Jean, accompanied by their teacher, venture inside. Seo anxiously asks Jean to return safely. Inside the dungeon, the teacher observes the student's reaction time and notes that Jin's is the quickest, earning him a bonus point. The dungeon they enter is of the Annihilation type. Jean instructs his team to follow the textbook and provide square information. The teacher recognizes Jean as an exceptional student whose enthusiasm and aptitude surpass others, despite not being supported by his talents. They soon encounter an orc, and Jean orders Kong to use his shield to block it, while another team member also defends with their shield. Jean swiftly attacks and effortlessly kills the monster. The teacher becomes slightly suspicious, considering that Kong could have blocked the orc with his shield, but speculates that the monster was unexpectedly stronger. She realizes that this C-rank dungeon seems closer to a D-rank one. More green monsters assail them, and Jean commands the archers to take their positions. Kong successfully blocks the monsters with his shield, while Jean and others continue to stab the pinned-down creatures. The teacher breathes a sigh of relief, realizing her worries were unfounded. However, outside the dungeon, it is revealed that the dungeon has been traded with a seeker from another guild. The treacherous Karma Guild deceived them by providing false information about this so-called E-rank dungeon. It was a scam orchestrated by a student seeking a dungeon for themselves. Meanwhile, inside the dungeon, the team reaches the boss room. As they open the massive doors, Jean senses that something is terribly wrong. They are confronted by an enormous monster, and the teacher realizes that a grave mistake has occurred. She declares an emergency situation and immediately halts the test. The dungeon they entered is not an E-rank, but an A-rank boss-type dungeon. The opening of the dungeon is swiftly sealed by the Korean Users Association, and the culprit responsible for the incident is apprehended and imprisoned. However, even the Karma Guild has no knowledge of the whereabouts of the seeker involved, and the incident is considered an unfortunate circumstance. Sang-hui, the team leader of the Users Association and an S-class holder, takes charge of the investigation. She reveals that the dungeon is so perilous that even the B-rank instructor accompanying Group B is no match for it. The dungeon is an A-rank boss type, and the boss itself could be comparable to an S-rank Annihilation type boss or potentially even stronger. An anxious Seo asks Sang-hui if there is any way to rescue the trapped students inside the dungeon. Unfortunately, Sang-hui explains that unless everyone inside the dungeon perishes, there is no way to intervene midway. The best course of action is to seek revenge for their deaths. Meanwhile, within the dungeon, the bloodthirsty boss prepares to pounce on a team member, but the teacher swiftly intervenes, using the ability Mesmerize and Tangle to immobilize the massive creature with numerous red ropes. The teacher takes charge of the expedition, instructing the others to strike the boss with all their might while she holds him captive. However, panic ensues among the students as they witness the horrifying boss, contemplating how they could possibly defeat such a powerful entity. Seizing the opportunity, the boss breaks free from the ropes, much to the teacher's horror. She warns the students that if they continue panicking, they will surely meet their demise. In that critical moment, Jean steps forward and launches a powerful attack with his mighty sword. Realizing that he can no longer conceal his strength, Jean utilizes his Info Gacha ability, and luckily summons Lu Shan, a bearer of good fortune. He follows up by employing his Connection Gacha ability, and to his sheer luck, a diamond card materializes before him, granting him the mightiest sword ever. With his newfound power, Jean swiftly strikes the boss, leaving the teacher perplexed. She questions Jean about what has transpired, and he casually responds that luck has been favoring him lately. It is revealed that Jean has formed a connection with the legendary German hero, Siegfried, renowned as the great dragon slayer of his time, who vanquished the evil dragon named Fafnir. However, when Jin initially attacked the boss, it managed to block his strike, leaving him wondering about its true rank. Using his observation techniques, Jin determines that the boss's level is 82, placing it at the high end of S-ranked monsters. A fierce battle ensues between Jin and the boss. Jin taunts the S-rank monster, questioning how it will fare against an SS rank fighter. The monster relentlessly swings its twin-blade axe at Jin, who skillfully evades each strike. The teacher and the rest of the group are astonished by Jin's remarkable agility and proficiency in combat. Determined to end the battle, Jin decides to deliver a fatal blow by plunging his sword into the monster's heart. With a resounding thud, the monster collapses, and Siegfried congratulates Jin for his extraordinary display of bravery. Graciously, Jin returns the gratitude. His fellow companions rush to his side, expressing their appreciation, acknowledging that without Jin and the teacher, they would have surely perished. The teacher herself commends Jin for his hard work and exceptional skills, referring to him as an SSI. However, the boss isn't defeated yet and launches a surprise attack on Jin from behind. Kong notices the impending danger and shouts at Jin to dodge, but the boss hurls Kong aside with a loud thud. Fueled by anger, Jin attempts to behead the boss, but the boss successfully blocks his sword. Jin inquires if blocking is a typical skill of an orc, to which the teacher responds that the orc lord usually employs a war cry to disorient their opponents, before engaging in close-quarters combat. She states that this is not their usual fighting pattern. The teacher begins to piece together what is happening, realizing that the monster, on the brink of death, has undergone a rare occurrence known as mutation, where it acquires a new skill. The students and instructors find themselves unable to move their bodies, as the teacher explains that it is a result of the boss's war cry. Jin tries to strike the monster with his sword, but the monster effortlessly evades his attack. The monster prepares to strike Jin with its fist when Siegfried's voice warns him, and Jin employs his sword to block the blow. Siegfried informs Jin that the skill possessed by the monster is the Dragon Blood Awakening, an ability Siegfried obtained after defeating the malevolent dragon Fafnir and consuming its blood. He explains that the technique renders all attacks temporarily ineffective, heals the user's injuries when near death, and boosts the user's temporary stats. The boss launches another assault on Jin, prompting Siegfried to warn him that his time on Earth is coming to an end. Siegfried advises Jin to retreat until the effects of the Dragon Blood Awakening wear off. Jin starts to feel the weight of his sword increasing, and the monster realizes that Jin has grown weaker. The others in the group are rendered powerless, and Jin depletes all of his mana, leaving him unable to utilize the connection gacha. As the green monster lunges forward, Jin finds himself at the precipice of life and death. Thoughts race through his mind. Would he allow himself to perish in this moment? He remembers his aspiration of becoming a skilled mana user and his promise to Seo that he would return safely. With determination in his heart, Jin refuses to succumb easily. He musters every ounce of strength within him and pushes back against the onslaught. Fate seems to be on Jin's side as the king of all arms, the wristband, successfully manifests the ancient weapon he desired, the Dragon Killer Sword, Ba Meng. The weapon detects dragon blood within the boss and grants Jin the ability to wield its power. The ancient weapon signals that in the presence of dragon blood, the user's strength increases by 1000%. With 2 or 3 powerful strikes, Jin manages to subdue the green monster, experiencing a rapid surge in his stats. The King of All Arms then heals Jin's injuries, showcasing its regenerative capabilities. A status window appears, revealing that Jin has successfully loaded the highest possible target, retaining a portion of the target's abilities within his own body. This means that Jin has now acquired the skill of Dragon Blood Awakening. Overjoyed by this development, Jin remarks that increasing stats after obtaining the gold name card was only surpassed by gaining the dragon's skill, akin to a new lease on life. His comrades and instructor observe Jin with a mix of astonishment and confusion, while he finds solace in Kang's well-being. However, Kang expresses doubt about Jin's extraordinary talents, questioning whether he intends to eliminate them all, considering his high-ranking status and hidden identity. Amidst these events, the agents anxiously await Team B's emergence from the dungeon portal. They discuss the potential consequences if the team remains hidden out of fear, leading to a dungeon break and the release of all the monsters. One agent suggests closing the dungeon, but Sanghui reassures them that with Sangtae inside the dungeon, there shouldn't be any issues. Sangtae is known for his unwavering dedication to the assigned mission, even if he knows he may not be able to clear it. Soon, signs of movement from the dungeon catch their attention, and the agents prepare themselves for retribution against the arrivals. Team B, led by the teacher, emerges from the dungeon unscathed, and she proudly announces the successful clearance of the A-rank boss-type dungeon. Shanghai, one of the agents, inquires how they were able to accomplish such a feat. In response, the teacher points towards a weapon, a war axe belonging to the Orc Lord. Shanghai expresses concern over the presence of this extremely rare weapon, as there are fewer than 10 of its kind in all of Korea. She then questions the teacher whether she defeated the Orc Lord. Just as curiosity fills the air, the CEO of the academy steps forward, praising the teacher for her bravery and asserting that whatever she has acquired belongs to the academy. Unexpectedly, Jean makes his presence known, confidently declaring that the axe rightfully belongs to him since he was the one who slew the orc. When the CEO attempts to assert his dominance over Jean, the determined student quickly asserts his independence, stating that he is not the CEO's subordinate. Jean goes further by threatening to file a complaint against the CEO for the catastrophic events that unfolded. Despite the CEO's attempts to dismiss Jin's claims as lies, the teacher steps forward to corroborate Jin's account, confirming that he indeed defeated the Orc Lord without her intervention. Still skeptical, the CEO argues that a mere student could not have achieved such a feat. Jean admonishes the CEO, urging him to prioritize the well-being of those who barely survived the ordeal instead of fixating on the spoils. However, the CEO remains adamant, claiming that since everyone emerged unharmed, there is no cause for concern. Feeling deeply embarrassed, Shanghai takes charge and orders her subordinates to provide urgent medical attention to the survivors, as their exposure to the war cry may have resulted in internal injuries. Meanwhile, the teacher recounts the events that unfolded in the dungeon to Shanghai, describing the mutation of the Orc Lord, the emission of crimson energy that healed its injuries, and Jin's astonishing display of power as he cleaved the orc's body in a single slash. The teacher explains that when Jin entered the dungeon, he wielded only a spear, but during his battle against the formidable lord, his weapon transformed into a magnificent sword with a golden handle and an azure jewel embedded in it. She speculates that Jin may have been utilizing a mana consumption artifact. In the midst of this, Jin opens his status window and rejoices to discover that his expedition has resulted in him gaining 2 levels. However, he acknowledges that his power leveling is not significant enough, realizing that he needs to venture into more dungeons to level up. He contemplates the challenges of finding dungeons on his own or relying on the information gacha, both of which are arduous tasks. While lost in thought, Sanghui and the teacher enter Jin's hospital room. Sanghui first expresses concern for Jin's well-being and then introduces herself formally. She proceeds to provide an explanation for the previous dungeon incident, revealing that an academy salesperson fell victim to a dungeon scam. The whereabouts of the individual who made the deal with the salesperson remain unknown, but Sanghui suspects their affiliation with the Karma Guild. However, there is no concrete evidence implicating the guild, and with the academy covering all expenses, the incident is likely to be closed without further investigation. The suspicion towards the Karma Guild arises from the long-standing tensions between the guild and the academy. Jin experiences a sense of relief, realizing that this incident may not be related to Zhou's revenge. However, he contemplates the impact of killing a few academy students on the institutions themselves, considering that the culprits are not even academy users. The teacher accepts responsibility for the incident and offers a heartfelt apology to Jin, revealing that the current CEO will step down as a result. Jin graciously accepts the apology and compensation. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Sanghui extends an offer to Jin to work for their country. Initially hesitant due to his past experience as a military slave, Jin's misunderstanding is clarified. Users exempted from paying the 300 million won fee for using the Awakened are obligated to perform certain duties for the country. However, since Jin has already paid his fee, he is exempt from these duties. Furthermore, users employed by the country enjoy additional benefits, such as free access to country-run facilities and the ability to enter dungeons of their level without charge. Despite this enticing offer, Jin declines, citing his reliance on secret gachas and his aversion to contractual obligations. Undeterred, Sanghui presents another proposal, an expedition request. Jin would be tasked with clearing. Shanghue approaches Jin with a request to purchase the Orc's war axe at a discounted price. Jin agrees and proceeds to sign the contract, willingly parting with the axe. Sanghui then informs him that he needs to be present at an E-rank destruction-type dungeon in 2 days. She takes the opportunity to give Jin a tour of the entire association. First, they visit the training center where muscular individuals engage in various exercises. Upon spotting Sanghui, they intensify their training, motivated by her strict leadership and captivating presence. Sanghui introduces Jin to everyone in the room, including Manny, whom she refers to as the youngest member. Jin notices that Manny seems somewhat cautious around him. Manny challenges Jin to a face-off, seemingly eager to impress Sanghui with his strength. Initially declining the mock duel, Jin changes his mind when Manny and others begin to mock him. Determined to prove himself, Jin accepts the challenge. Although Sanghui advises Jin against participating due to the vast difference in their ranks, Manny being a crank and Jin only an E rank, Jin asserts that Sanghui should be aware of whom she's dealing with and seizes the opportunity to showcase his abilities. However, Sanghui believes that Jin's strength lies primarily in his equipment rather than his physical prowess, as noted by the teacher. While Jin may excel in real-life combat, mock duels in the Mana virtual realm present a different challenge. The game commences, and a status window appears, indicating that all stats will be doubled during gameplay. Jin can't help but be reminded of Joe, but he resolves to use this opportunity to learn from the Orc Slayer. However, before Manny can showcase his speed and kills, Jin decides to exit the game, informing Sanghui that he has seen enough of the tour. As he leaves, Sanghui reprimands Manny for his recklessness. Later on, Jin decides to use the connection gacha twice, considering he now possesses more than 20 mana. Though he believes his mana count is still insufficient to summon Lu Shan, the fortune bearer, he decides to focus on using connection gachas rather than info gachas. This way, he can increase his chances of obtaining rare or higher ranked characters after 10 gachas, gradually boosting his stats. When he uses the connection gacha, a blank card appears, summoning Yans from the Chromal Kingdom, a world different from Earth. Jin is thrilled, realizing that he can now summon fantasy heroes like great magicians and sword masters as well. Continuing his gacha session, Jin tries his luck again, but unfortunately, another blank card appears. A blank card means any random personality can appear, and to his disappointment, Lu Shan appears once more, wasting 6 mana. However, the status window reveals that he has successfully loaded the same character for the second time, earning him a combo gacha as a reward. However, since Lu Shan's stats were virtually useless, it didn't contribute much to his overall abilities. The talent level remained the same as well. Lu Shan explains to Jin that their connection plays a crucial role in summoning figures. The stronger the connection Jin has with a character, the higher the chance of summoning them. Jin finds this information believable, as he has noticed a similar pattern with his info gacha pulls. He also recalls summoning 12 figures before, with one being from another world and the remaining 11 from Earth. Jin checks his stat window once more and realizes that his stats increase as Lu Shan's stats grow. He then decides to use the combo gacha, which allows him to select 2 figures from his album. The window warns that the randomly loaded figure will be the one with connections to both selected characters. For example, if Jean chooses Lu Bu and Lu Shan, the combo will result in the formation of Lu Bei. However, the combo gacha only works within a narrow range of the selected figure's mana count. Lu Shan has 4 mana while Lu Bu has 99 mana, making the combo possible. On the other hand, combining Lu Shan with Giz, who has 347 mana, is not feasible. A few days later, Jean stands before an E-rank annihilation-type dungeon. Before entering, he uses his observation skill to ensure he doesn't fall victim to another scam like last time. The dungeon is inhabited by goblins, with a hobgoblin serving as the boss. There's a lump of mana stones buried beneath the boss's room. Satisfied with his assessment, Jean ventures into the dungeon, where a horde of goblins immediately attacks him. Jean skillfully dispatches them one by one using his spear, quickly leveling up in the process. The remaining goblins are terrified and flee for their lives. Soon, the boss arrives, but Jean effortlessly delivers a single blow to defeat it. Surprised by how easily he cleared the dungeon, Jean begins digging for the mana stones in the boss's room. He retrieves the lump of stones and exits the dungeon. The agent is astounded, as it hasn't even been 2 hours since Jean entered, and he has already completed the dungeon. Taken aback, the agent informs Jean that there are no more association-managed dungeons in the area. However, he introduces Jean to a website called Mana.net, where people from different guilds form teams for various expeditions due to the increasing number of dungeons. Jin's excitement grows as he discovers Mana.net, a platform where he can register with his Mana Watch's serial number and connect with other adventurers. He searches for a nearby group and finds one that surprises him. They don't care about ranks and only require a porter. Eager to join, Jean attempts to contact the group, but to his disappointment, they have already recruited someone else. He decides to set this opportunity aside for another time and hands over the mana stones to the agency worker. According to the contract, the spoils belong to Jean, as he can assess their condition unlike the mana stones. The agency worker marvels at Jin's seemingly endless good luck, but Jean humbly attributes it to his observation skill. Meanwhile, in a training room, Jean engages in rigorous exercise. A news flash on the gym's television catches his attention. An outbreak occurred at 12 p.m. outside Ozan City. Thankfully, the prompt arrival of association users prevented any casualties. Jean ponders the timing, realizing that he was in Ozan City earlier. If the dungeon broke at 12 p.m., the peak mana leakage should have occurred before then. So why didn't Jean sense anything? He grows suspicious of the dungeon expedition advertisement he saw on Mana.net earlier. Who would be crazy enough to recruit for a dungeon on the verge of breaking? As Jean leaves the gym, he encounters Lu Shan waiting for him. Lu urges Jean to use an info gacha, but Jean explains that he's low on mana due to his recent dungeon expedition. Nevertheless, he gives it a try, only to receive useless information. Lu's good luck seems to have deserted him in that moment. However, a foreboding-looking capsule drops later, indicating that critical information has been received. The status window informs Jean that future info gachas related to a particular subject will be strengthened. The capsule shatters, revealing a notification stating that an artificial dungeon break will occur in 4 days in Seoul's Gangnam district. This revelation suggests that the morning's dungeon outbreak was also intentional, as there was no prior evacuation announcement, and Jean himself felt nothing while being in the area. Jean suspects that the person he spoke to earlier in the morning is the mastermind behind these deliberate dungeon breaks. The information about the break was likely pulled because of Jin's brief connection with the man during their conversation. Realizing that he wouldn't stand a chance if he tried to stop the break alone, Jean considers spreading the information indirectly to Sean Goe. However, he knows that if he does, they will investigate how he obtained that information, potentially subjecting him to torture until his death. Determined to become stronger, Jean resolves to single-handedly halt the upcoming dungeon break but decides to inform Sean Goe in a discreet manner. Soon, a window appears, urging Jean to embark on a quest to stop the outbreak, with a countdown timer of 10 hours and 27 minutes. It becomes clear to Jean why he was granted the miracle in the first place. It is through him that the universe can communicate to prevent changes in the future. Meanwhile, the Users Association holds an emergency meeting to address the alarming situation of 2 dungeon outbreaks, occurring within a single day. The problem lies in the fact that there were no users present to prevent these outbreaks, which took everyone by surprise. It is discovered that 2 users lost their lives, both fatally stabbed by a sword. Under immense pressure, Sang-Hui makes the decision to entrust all the dungeons to Jean, realizing the gravity of the situation. Simultaneously, Jean finds himself at the graduation ceremony, where he is honored with awards and recognition for his exceptional grades and performance. While the status window persistently reminds him of the impending dungeon outbreak, Jean cannot afford to miss his graduation, especially since the academy has decided to refund all his fees. His teacher and Seo offer their congratulations, with Seo presenting him with a lucky charm. Both Kong and Seo propose teaming up with Jean for future dungeon expeditions, but Jean declines, believing that his friends are still immature and he doesn't want to put their lives at risk. He resolves to conquer the dungeons using his own strengths. 2 days later, Jean tirelessly searches throughout Gangnam but fails to locate any dungeons. Eventually, he manages to find 3, an A-class dungeon near Seongsu Bridge, a C-class dungeon in Nanhyeon-dong, and a D-class dungeon in Daichi-dong. However, the A and C-class dungeons are already under the ownership of guilds, while the D-class dungeon is managed by the association, making it impossible for Jean to clear them alone. Failure to clear these dungeons in time could lead to a massive monster outbreak in the heart of the city, endangering numerous lives. Just as Jean is grappling with this predicament, he receives a call from Seo, who seeks his assistance with dungeon quests. Jean seizes the opportunity and requests access to the D-class dungeon in Gangnam, as it is the only one owned by the association. After convincing Sang-Hui, he successfully arranges a dungeon expedition, setting the time for the following morning. The status window displays a remaining time of 29 hours and 10 minutes, emphasizing the urgency of their mission. It has been a pleasure to share this story with all of you. We are delighted to have had the opportunity to provide you with quality content and entertainment. We invite you to follow us on our social media to stay updated on all our latest releases. We would be thrilled to receive your comments and suggestions regarding the anime you would like to see on our channel. We look forward to seeing you again in our next video.